I'm Charlie Garrett, and this is the CG Report. The Fed has lost control. Hyperinflation ahead. That and a lot of other things to go over on today's report. So today is 30 May. It's Sunday. It's time for the CG Report. And before we get into our first category, I'd like to say that we have a visitor that came all the way from Orlando this morning, Spencer Hay. And if you see the video, you guys in the church will see him, but in the video, I'll put his picture up and you can see that he's a couple inches taller than me. Very tall individual. And so I tried standing on my toes to be up to his level for the picture and it didn't work. So I just sank back down to my normal level. And I so much appreciate you coming. He's a wonderful gentleman. I've had a good long conversation with him so far this morning. He came in early and what a blessing to meet you. So thank you for making the effort. Starting out today, we have some news from Israel, from All Israel. I want to see if this first article, I'm just going to read a short portion of it, if you can see how they can reconcile it with the second article. Okay? All Israel says, Israel declares complete victory over COVID, set to cancel most remaining restrictions. All green passport rules to be canceled on June 1st, which is 1.5 more days away. Even masks might go after a few weeks. Okay, they have complete victory over COVID. Next article, All Israel. Israeli bill calls for extension of government's special powers related to COVID until March 2022. The Knesset introduced a bill to extend the special powers law, which allows the government to impose new COVID restrictions until March 2022 in order to prevent another wave of illness in Israel if necessary. So they obviously don't have complete victory over COVID if they're worried about that, or they just want more special powers. This law allows the government to implement health regulations they believe necessary to control a potential outbreak. This would include the use of the green label system that prohibits entry to some workplaces and all theaters, hotels, and restaurants to citizens who have not taken the COVID injection nor recovered from COVID, which includes children, and restrictions on travel, gatherings, and mask mandates. So there you go. One thing does not reconcile with the other, at least in my mind. From the Times of Israel, Pollock, I think that's how you pronounce his name. If not, I'm not going to pronounce it the other way. Pollock, the vicious lie of apartheid is an attempt to destroy Israel. And I will agree with this, and that's why I've included this article in here. A black Israeli named Eden Aline qualified for the Eurovision Song Contest with a song including lyrics in Arabic, as well as Hebrew and English. And until the Palestinian terror group Hamas fired rockets at Israeli civilians, both Jewish and Arab, an Islamist Arab political party was about to join an Israeli governing coalition. Israel's Declaration of Independence provides full and equal citizenship to Arabs, as well as due representation for Arab citizens in all provisional and permanent institutions. That's the opposite of apartheid as practiced in South Africa, where black people were denied the vote. Moreover, there is no segregation or discrimination in Israel, as there was under apartheid. And a large majority of both Arabs and Jews support programs to narrow socioeconomic gaps between Arabs and Jews. The Palestinians who live alongside Israel in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, in the east, and Gaza in the west, live in different circumstances that are the result of terrorism and conflict. If you travel to the West Bank, you will encounter checkpoints guarded by Israeli soldiers, and the security barrier, a wall in some places, a fence in others. Sometimes there are separate roads for Israeli and Palestinian vehicles. While unfortunate, these measures are relatively recent, and they are responses to Palestinian terror attacks on Israeli civilians. The security barrier, for example, ended Palestinian suicide bombings in Israeli cities. That's not apartheid. That's survival. The Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank, bans the sale of land to Jews on pain of life in prison. It also regularly incites hatred and violence against Jews and Israelis. Hamas, which governs Gaza, has an explicitly anti-Semitic genocidal charter. If there's any apartheid around, that is it. So there you go. That's a little look into what's going on in Israel and what the rest of the world this week has been saying about Israel. If you haven't been paying attention, we'll have some articles hopefully next week on that, or maybe it'll be over by then. But the whole world seems obsessed with coming against Israel when they were the defenders in this. Hamas was the aggressors. I just don't understand how the world can't see this, but for some reason they can't see this. From the Times of Israel, support for Israel among young U.S. evangelical Christians drops sharply. A new survey points to a growing divide in the U.S. between young evangelical Christians and their elders, especially in their views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, indicating Israel could see a significant drop in support in coming years. While the religious group has long been a bulwark of support for Israel in the United States, the Barna Group-administered poll indicates a sharp drop in support for the Jewish state and raises concerns that Israel could lose a key ally going forward. In a poll of over 700 evangelical Christians between the ages of 18 and 29 that was conducted between March and April, respondents were asked where they place their support in the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. Just 33.6% said with Israel. 24.3% said with the Palestinians, and 42.2% said with neither side. In 2018, a survey of young evangelicals conducted by the same professors found that 75% of respondents sided with Israel over the Palestinians, while 22% preferred to not take a side in the dispute. So you can see there's a huge divergence from just a couple years ago. Just 2.8% expressed some degree of support for the Palestinians then. Over 22% responded that Israel does not treat Palestinians fairly. 35.7% were neutral on the issue, while a plurality, 41.5%, responded that Israel treats Palestinians fairly, the latest poll found. The survey of young evangelicals had a 3.7-point margin of error with a 95% level of confidence. So that's telling you that this is a trend in our country which should not be taking place, but it is. From Zero Hedge, awkward exchange. I'm just going to read the title and just imagine this in your head, okay? Netanyahu is meeting with Blinken in front of the whole world, okay? Awkward exchange. Netanyahu trashes U.S. nuclear talks with Iran in front of Blinken. The guy was not happy. His face was all puckered up like a sour lemon when Netanyahu said it, but he is a man that will take action if he needs to, and all of Israel is a nation that will take action if they need to. And if America is going to go into this treaty and they're going to renegotiate and they're going to sign it and do all the things that they're saying they're going to do, Israel will not tolerate it if it becomes threatening to their existence. They will go in and they will take care of the problem that the United States is creating right now. Now, some news concerning the state of Christianity. I'd like to congratulate Bob Hart. He has finished watching every single Superior Word video that we have ever put out. That is a huge achievement. This took him a long time, and he has watched every single video that we have ever done. Was he asleep?
Does he sleep?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if he sleeps or not. I got to tell you what, that's a lot of videos, and he's always had very good questions with the videos. He's emailed me things. He's very positive, and I was just stunned that, every week it seemed he'd send me an update on what he'd been doing, and absolutely incredible. So hat is off to him. If you're only watching prophecy updates and reports like this, then you're not getting theology. All you're getting is maybe a little bit of recent news, and you're probably getting some ideas on eschatology, which are incorrect if you watch too many different prophecy updates. And hopefully you'll get a salvation call once in a while, but that's about all you're getting. What you need to do is to learn the Bible. And so I would ask you to not only watch prophecy updates, but to go ahead and get into the Bible. We've got every single passage from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers done. We're halfway through Deuteronomy, and you will learn what those books are about. I assure you. It's my heart, it's my joy to be into the Word. And so please do that. Start watching those sermons, and I know that you will be blessed. And if you're not, I will give you a full refund of your time, okay? From the Epic Times. Oregon, first state to require vaccination proof for maskless entry into businesses, workplaces, and churches. The Oregon Health Authority is requiring that people in workplaces, businesses, and religious sites show proof of COVID-19 vaccination in order to be allowed maskless entry to the facilities. Businesses, employers, and faith institutions now have the option to adjust their masking guidance to allow fully vaccinated individuals to no longer wear a mask in their establishments. You think of Florida, and we wiped out that for everything a long time ago, okay? And we haven't had any problem at all. And we'll hear about Texas in a little while, some more about Texas. But this is people that are living in fear because they don't know the Lord. They don't know that they can have security in salvation and know that they will be reconciled with God through the shed blood of Christ. And that's why they act this way. Businesses, employers, and faith institutions doing so must have a policy in place to check the vaccination status of all individuals before they enter their establishment. The statewide policy is the first of the kind in the country and is raising concerns for those who don't want to wear masks or take the vaccine due to a number of concerns, including safety, side effects, efficacy, mistrust in pharmaceutical companies, and a lack of full FDA approval. The ACLU, now if the ACLU gets involved in something like this, you got to know that it's really bad, okay? The ACLU in late March flagged vaccine passport systems' potential problems in an opinion piece, arguing they would create two tiers of unvaccinated down here and vaccinated people up here. Well, I think it's the other way around, but there you go. From the Daily Caller. Federal judge sides with Biden, rules Christian college must allow biological men to share showers with women. Okay, now this is because we have something called 501c3. People were told this would be a great thing a long time ago under the Johnson administration, and all these churches rushed to participate in it. You get tax-free status and ooh and ah. Let me tell you what, that was one of the biggest mistakes that this nation, that the church has accepted in this nation ever. I'm telling you what, because now these Christian colleges that get federal funding, and it's been like, a hog that they've been sucking off of all of this time, and all of a sudden now they have to say, I'm gonna not take your money anymore, which they're not gonna do, or they're gonna have to live with these guidelines as a Christian college and saying they're gonna allow this. That's what's going on right here, right now. A federal judge ruled that students of the opposite biological sex must be allowed to share shower spaces and dorms at Christian College in Missouri. Judge Roseanne Ketchmark ruled against the College of the Ozarks, a Christian college which had sued Biden's admin over its transgender discrimination policies. The college had challenged Biden over his January 20th executive order, which prevented schools from denying children access to bathrooms of their choosing. Women shouldn't be forced to share private spaces, including showers and dorm rooms, with males. And religious schools shouldn't be punished simply because of their beliefs about biological sex, Julie Blake, senior counsel for the ADF, told reporters. The Biden admin's overreach continues to victimize women, girls, and people of faith by gutting their legal protections, and it must be stopped. The college faces 6-figure fines if it violates the Biden admin's order. They got themselves into this by accepting we're going to go 501c3. And churches all over the country are going to be facing this exact same thing if they take this. This is going to go through. If it gets challenged, great. Eventually it's going to get to the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to decide. If they decide for this type of a ruling, every church in this country that has male and female bathrooms is going to have to take those signs down. Okay, unless they're not under 501c3. I know a church that you all probably are aware of that is not, okay? It's a real shame what's going on in this nation. It's a real shame, but this has been a long-term plan. As we saw in our sermon last week, this has been a long-term plan, and they are getting their fingers into everything now because they have the initiative.
The love of money is the root of many evils.
Yes, the love of money is the root of many evils. From the Christian Post, Army chaplain punished after Facebook post on transgender military ban appeals reprimand. Good for him. A decorated U.S. Army chaplain is appealing actions taken against him after he voiced support on his personal social media page for a military policy preventing trans-identified individuals from serving in the military. Chaplain Major Andrew Calvert is contesting the reprimand from the Army after he commented on a January 25th news article about the Biden admin's intentions of dropping President Trump's ban on trans-identified men and women serving in the military. Calvert was issued a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand after anonymous screenshots were sent to the 3rd Forces Assistance Brigade's Facebook account of his January 25th comments. An investigating officer from the brigade determined that he had violated a DoD directive, which he did not, and suspended him from his duties. The legal nonprofit First Liberty Institute is representing the chaplain and insisted in a letter to the commanding officer, Lieutenant General White, that the chaplain did nothing wrong, especially because his post included a disclaimer indicating that these were his personal opinions and not to be taken as representative of the Army or DoD, which means he is allowed to do this. But Calvert's attorney argues that the adverse actions taken against him violated DoD regulations and the U.S. Constitution, as it was a retaliation for expressing a religious viewpoint on a matter of public concern. Although Chaplain Calvert's sincerely held religious beliefs might overlap with what some view as political issues, service members are permitted to express their opinions on such matters. As a reminder, Chaplain Calvert merely expressed his sincerely held religious belief that was, at the time he expressed it, wholly consistent with DoD policy because Trump had issued the policy. In the Facebook post in question, Calvert asked, "How is rejecting reality, biology, not evidence that a person is mentally unfit, meaning ill, and thus making that person unqualified to serve?" There's little difference in this than over those who believe and argue for a flat earth. Now he's in trouble with the flat earthers, and you do not want to mess with the flat earthers. Okay, I'll tell you that right now, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. So there you go with that. Just so you know, the earth is a globe. Just so you're all aware of that. I'm not defending flat earth. I'm saying that you don't want to mess with those people because they will flay you alive. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, whatever. People want to believe what they want to believe. All right, some news from the Mideast and Africa today. From The Independent. Iran deliberately shot down plane full of passengers in act of terrorism, Canadian judge rules. Remember that plane that was shot down? A judge has ruled this as an act of terrorism. Now, normally I wouldn't even care about this article, but they are now, within 1 year of today, 1 year ago, they are designated as a terrorist state by a recognized government. And our president is still working on the JCPOA, meaning he is now dealing with a terrorist organization. Everybody see this? Okay. A judge in Ontario has ruled that Iran intentionally shot down a passenger airliner in January 2020, causing the deaths of 176 people, including dozens of Canadians. The decision adds judicial weight to allegations that the crash of the Ukrainian International Airlines plane shortly after it departed Tehran for Kiev was not an accident. A total of 55 Canadians and 30 permanent residents of Canada died in the tragedy. Now a civil jury of 6 of their fellow nationals, ordinary members of the public, will decide how much compensation the Iranian government must pay for their deaths. The plaintiffs are asking for $1.5 billion, and the jury hearing on damages is likely to occur in the next 3 months. In reviewing the suit, Justice Edward Bilobaba of Ontario's Supreme Court said that it did not allege negligence on the part of the Iranians, but that the incident had been a deliberate attack. As such, it falls under the remit of the Justice for Victims of Terrorism Act. Our president, the President of the United States of America, is currently in negotiations with a terrorist organization. Call your congressman and highlight this fact, this article, and tell them, congressmen and senators, that we cannot tolerate that as citizens of the United States of America. Everybody got that? That's what needs to happen. He is dealing with a known terrorist organization that killed citizens of a country that we have relations with, intimate relations with. From the Times of Israel, Hamas chief says war foils Israel's attempt at Arab coexistence and normalization. That's not going to happen. They're just pipe dreams, but I have a reason for including this. Hamas terror chief Ismail Haniyeh hailed Hamas's victory. Victory, they won. So why are they getting all this money sent to them now? In the recent hostilities with Israel, saying it had foiled attempts by Israel to integrate into the Arab world. He also thanked Iran for the funds and weaponry it has provided to the Strip. A known terrorist state has been sending this stuff to Hamas, and our president, the president of the United States of America, is dealing with the nation of Iran in order to bring back the JCPOA. We must contact our senators and congressmen, and we need to say this cannot happen. This battle has destroyed the project of coexistence with the Israeli occupation, of the project normalization with Israel. Hanea said from Qatar, where he has been residing, apparently referring to the widespread clashes between Israeli Arabs and Jews and Israel's recent peace agreements with 4 Arab nations. Several Arab countries, such as Israel's neighbor Jordan, saw thousands gather to protest Israeli airstrikes on Gaza during the fighting. Morocco, a country that recently began forming closer ties with Israel, also saw widespread pro-Palestinian rallies. While Israel will struggle to restore ties with its Arab minority after the riots and attacks, it was not immediately evident that the fighting was detrimental to its new ties with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. Egypt, another Arab nation with a peace agreement with Israel, played a major role in negotiating the ceasefire. It's not going to affect it at all. How do we know that? Can anybody tell me how we know it's not going to affect this agreements that Trump did? Because the Bible says they're not coming against them in Gog Magog. That's how we know. We just need to look at the Bible and we say, this guy is delusional. From the Times of Israel, Hamas co-founder to UK TV, Israel has no right to exist. This is after the fighting is over, and they're still saying this. And we're sending them money from the United States of America. In a rare interview, Hamas co-founder Mahmoud al-Zahar told Britain's Sky News that Israel has no right to exist and said the terror group's strategy was to target Israeli population centers. That is against the law. That is called terrorism. That is what that is. And he acknowledged that that is what they were intending on doing. They purposefully targeted population centers. That is against UN laws. It is against moral laws, and our president is sending them money. In stilted English, al-Zahar explains that Hamas's victory was a function of the group's ability to fire rockets on densely populated Israeli civilian areas. Stone challenged al-Zahar. You were firing rockets and missiles from civilian areas here in Gaza at civilians in Israel. He said that's not acceptable. That is a war crime. I'm glad this guy called him out. Al-Zahar rejected the accusations that Hamas endangers Palestinians. No single rocket was sent from a civilian area. Well, they've got hundreds of videos saying otherwise. We fired most of the rockets from the border. Absolute lies.
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. As we span the globe, we try to never miss something interesting from Mongolia. From The Diplomat. Is Mongolia heading toward one-party rule? Well, I don't know, but seems like the U.S. is trying its best to do that right now. The political struggle in Mongolia is intensifying as the presidential election approaches. 8 members of the parliament went on a week-long hunger strike to protest. They're protesting the ruling Mongolian People's Party actions using the 3 critical organs of state, the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court, and the General Election Committee, to manipulate the June 9 presidential election process. In response to this political distress, Democrat Party leaders reached out to the international community, urging observers abroad to pay attention to recent developments in Mongolian politics ahead of the presidential election next month. I would say that if they're asking for the international community to watch the elections, we ought to have the same thing in the United States on our next election. Have real people that are willing to monitor every single thing that goes on, just in case. The book of Daniel prophesied that technology would increase in the end times. What's up in that regard? From New Atlas, morphing computer chip. This is so cool. This is so cool. Morphing computer chip repels hundreds of professional DARPA hackers. Engineers have designed a computer processor that thwarts hackers by randomly changing its microarchitecture every few milliseconds. Known as Morpheus, the puzzling processor has now aced its first major tests, repelling hundreds of professional hackers in a DARPA security challenge. In 2017, DARPA backed the University of Michigan's Morpheus project with $3.6 million in funding, and now the novel processor has been put to the test. Over 4 months in 2020, DARPA ran a bug bounty program called Finding Exploits to Thwart Tampering, pitting 525 professional security researchers against Morpheus and a range of other processors. The goal of the program was to test new hardware-based security systems which could protect data no matter how vulnerable the underlying software was. Morpheus was mocked up to resemble a medical database complete with software vulnerabilities. And yet, not a single attack made it through its defenses. There's basically no such thing as bug-free software, and in many cases, these bugs can be exploited by hackers. Software developers will usually patch them up when they find them, but that often doesn't happen until after an attack, and hackers will just move on to the next vulnerability. The cycle continues in a never-ending arms race between hackers and developers. More recently, computer scientists are realizing that hardware can play an important role in security. To design a piece of malware, hackers need to understand the microarchitecture of a processor so they can figure out where to inject their malicious code. Locking down the system at the hardware level could potentially end the arms race once and for all. That was the design philosophy behind Morpheus. Essentially, the processor starts by encrypting key information such as the location, format, and content of data, but that's not enough on its own. A dedicated hacker could still crack that code within a few hours. And that's where Morpheus gets clever. The system shuffles that encryption randomly every few hundred milliseconds. That way, even if a hacker somehow manages to get a picture of the entire processor, it'll completely change before they have a chance to act on it. Imagine trying to solve a Rubik's Cube that rearranges itself every time you blink. That's what hackers are up against with Morpheus. It makes the computer an unsolvable puzzle. Importantly, this difficulty doesn't apply to programmers or users because the card shuffling happens at a level that legitimate users of the system don't directly interact with. The main side effect is that apparently Morpheus runs about 10% slower than an otherwise equivalent system would. But that's a pretty good trade-off for a virtually unhackable processor. And if they wait 18 minutes, they will get the processor power to overdo that 10% slower. So who cares? That is amazing. It's a dangerous world, including the inevitable plagues of the book of Revelation, which it prophesies of. Let's see how that's developing. From the Epic Times, Texas governor. COVID metrics. Remember last week we were talking about Neanderthal thinking and it didn't come about? Well, since then, COVID metrics kept improving after ending mandates. Governor Abbott noted that his state kept seeing improved COVID-19 metrics after he lifted most capacity restrictions and the statewide mask mandate in March, despite harsh criticism from Democrats. So it's not just that they leveled off and the COVID went away. All the metrics have gone up, all of them. It's because this is called herd immunity, which they won't admit you can now have without vaccines, okay? But herd immunity is when you all develop an immunity because of being in contact with people that are sick. That's the way it was until the CDC changed its meaning of herd immunity. So I'm saying that because now the CDC will dispute that, and I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube by saying something that disputes the CDC. So the CDC now says that you cannot obtain herd immunity except by being vaccinated. Okay, so everybody here, please go out and get your vaccination so we can be herd immune in this church. All right? Got to say things like that nowadays. The Empowerer. 27-year-old model Stephanie Dubois dies after AstraZeneca vaccine. Stephanie Dubois of Cyprus was a model with RMG Model Agency. She was recently hospitalized and in a coma after a brain hemorrhage. Her condition was said to be a reaction from the COVID AstraZeneca vaccine, according to friends and family on social media. From St. Louis Today, OSHA won't. Remember a couple weeks ago I told you that OSHA was required if you got the vaccine and you had something go wrong with the vaccine, they were required to pay. You remember that we talked about that and they had to report it? They're no longer required to do that. OSHA won't enforce ruling on counting vaccine reactions as recordable injuries. So if you get your vaccine because they tell you you have to get your vaccine, you cannot claim that as, lost time or anything else from your work.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. Good job there. From Yahoo, children as young as 6 months old are now participating in Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine trial. Yeah, 6-month-old. From JTN, University of Virginia bans unvaccinated students from in-person classes in campus. Can't go to in-person anymore at college if you haven't got your vaccine. Epic Times, students, except if you're in Texas. Epic Times, students rally against mandatory COVID-19 vaccines at New Jersey University. They're going to keep moving the goalposts, they say. From JTN, as New York prepares to fully reopen schools, Cuomo suggests vaccinations may be required. Little children off to school. CNN, Alabama governor signs bill banning COVID-19 vaccine passports. She's like the 20th now. I think there's 22 or 23. Liberty Counsel, memo on COVID vaccination mandates. This is from the Liberty Counsel. I would like anybody that's worried about their job and being told about vaccines to go to the Liberty Counsel website and type in what I just read you and print that off so that you have it. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that this is correct. I'm giving my disclaimer so I don't get banned off of YouTube. I'm simply reading what the Liberty Counsel has published for your consumption, okay? And it's not the whole thing. They've got a whole thing. I'm just going to read you the key points, okay? Liberty Counsel, memo on COVID vaccination mandates. Type that in from Liberty Counsel and it'll come up and then you can print it off. It's only a couple pages long. COVID vaccines cannot be mandatory under emergency use authorization. COVID vaccines cannot be mandatory under Title VII. Singling out employees for individual questioning or adverse action under the ADA, GINA, and Title VII. Conclusion, this is their conclusion. There are strong protections under federal law for persons who wish to decline the current EUA authorization COVID vaccines. Neither government nor private employers may force anyone to receive any of the COVID injections. Go and print that off. And you will have it. And I'm not saying, once again, my disclaimer, I'm not saying that they are correct. I'm just simply saying what they have published as lawyers for your consumption. Okay?
Council memo from who?
It's Liberty Counsel, and then you want to look up memo on COVID vaccination mandates. Or you can go to LC Action. LC Action. That's libertycounsellaction.org/vaccine. And that will come up. lcaction.org/vaccine, and you will have that information, okay? The state of morality is declining. Here's some news on that. CNN, Boy Scouts, which are already gone, so it hardly matters. Boy Scouts of America shows support for Black Lives Matter and will require some scouts to earn diversity badge. Okay, I was thinking about something with this Black Lives Matter thing this past week. Everybody is trying to defend that they're not racist, or they're trying to defend, I do good things for black people or whatever. If somebody calls me a racist or I'm a white supremacist, I'm going to say, yeah, so what? Because you're not going to win with these people. You will never win. So what? I don't care what you think. So what? My state line. Illinois bill would require free tampons in boys' bathroom. At schools, yes. New legislation passed by the Illinois House would require feminine-free hygiene products in boys' bathrooms. This is what Illinois is worried about. This is what they're worried about when they are so far in debt that they will never get out of it. They're going to go bankrupt, and then the U.S. is going to have to pay them out, but they're worried about this. House Bill 156 was passed and is sponsored by Representative Barbara Hernandez. The bill would place menstruation products in both boys' and girls' bathrooms, grades 4 to 12. This is really important for young menstruators, said Representative Hernandez.
Discriminating against the kindergartners.
Yeah, they're discriminating against kindergartners. Okay, from the Gateway Pundit. Now, I can't read you the words in this title. I'm going to have to work around it because this is so vulgar. But I want you to know the state of morality that's going on in the world. I can't read you the actual words of the title. You're just going to have to look it up yourself. Teen Vogue explains how to use a woman's time of the month in witchcraft to their 12 to 17-year-old readers. Teen Vogue is teaching children what to do with that. The article titled Something Blood Magic 3 spells, I can't read that title, okay, is the latest installment of their Practice Magic Witchcraft series. This is allowed. We use free speech and we say, the things that we say are free speech, like I'm going to go out and tell people about Jesus and you get arrested for it, but they can put this type of stuff out to children. Yeah. Some other news from around the world. Please be sure to check out the Superior Word sermons as well. You're watching a prophecy update. I think that you will benefit a lot more in your life if you watch the sermons. Zero Hedge. Just so you know, that's why he's here today, is because of the sermons. We've been talking about the sermons for the past hour. He came from Orlando because he said he's so excited about the Word of God. He found us through a Sergio and wrote a video on David and Goliath. He attends a Bible-believing church that goes line by line, but he wanted to come here to be a part of this church today, and I'm so grateful for that. The Fed has lost control. John Williams warns of hyperinflation in 2022. Now, I do not like scary stuff. I don't want to scare people, but he had a couple recommendations at the very end that I think you should listen to. Just do it, okay? And I'll explain why you can just do it and why it won't matter if you do it afterward. Economist John Williams, founder of shadowstats.com, and I'm going to tell you, I have read at least 8 other articles like that in the past week. Hyperinflation. And these are from specialists. These aren't dummies, okay? He says the Federal Reserve has painted itself into such a tight corner with the economy, it really has only 2 choices. Williams says it comes down to inflation or implosion. What would happen to the financial system if the Fed stopped printing massive amounts of money for stimulus and debt service? Williams explains, you could see financial implosion by preventing liquidity being put into the system. The system needs liquidity, meaning freshly created dollars, to function. Without that liquidity, you would see more of an economic implosion than you've already seen. In fact, I will contend that the headline pandemic numbers have actually been a lot worse than they have been reporting. It also means we are not recovering quite as quickly. The Fed needs to keep the banking system afloat. They want to keep the economy afloat. All that requires is a tremendous influx of liquidity in these difficult times. So, is the choice inflation or implosion, Williams says? That's the choice, and I think we're going to have a combination of both of them. I think we are eventually heading into a hyperinflationary economic collapse. It's not that we haven't been in an economic collapse already. We are coming back some now. The Fed has been creating money at a pace that has never been seen before. You are basically up 75% in money creation year over year. This is unprecedented. Normally, it might be 1 or 2% a year over year. The exploding money supply will lead to inflation. I'm not saying we're going to get to 75% inflation, but you are getting up to the 4 or 5% range, and you are soon going to be seeing 10% range year over year. The Fed has lost control of inflation. And remember, when the Fed has to admit the official inflation rate is 10%, my number is going to be around 15% or higher. My number rides on the top of their number. Right now, the Shadow Stats inflation rate is about 11%. That means we're in 11% inflation according to his stats, which means everything that you buy today is 11% more than last year, okay? That's if it were calculated the way it was before 1980, when the government started using accounting gimmicks to make inflation look less than it really is. The Shadow Stats number cuts out all the accounting gimmicks and is the true inflation rate that most Americans are seeing right now, not the official 4.25% recently reported. Williams says the best way to fight the inflation that is already here is to buy tangible assets. Here it is. Canned food is a tangible asset, and you can use it for barter if you have to. Now, I want you to know something. I have seen YouTube videos that tell you, and I know this is correct, that canned food never goes bad, okay? Unless the can pops, I'm talking it's still closed, but it pops, throw that away, don't eat that. But if it doesn't, that food in there is fine. As long as you keep it in a cool, dry place, it will last for years. I was telling my mom a couple days ago that there was, I think it was you, Mom, that there was a old couple in England, in the UK, 2 or 3 years ago, and they had been married 75 years, and they had a tin of chicken. And they decided to eat that on their 75th anniversary, and it didn't kill them. Okay, this stuff will last as long as the can has not been damaged. All right, canned food is a tangible asset, and you can use it for barter if you have to. I disagree with this next one. Physical gold and silver is the best way to protect your buying power over time. That may be true, but it's not a transmittable commodity. If you have gold in your hand and he has a loaf of bread, you're going to lose all that gold for a loaf of bread. Okay, unless you have little grains of gold and you can weigh it out to somebody that knows what it's worth, it's not a viable means of saving. Okay, there are other ways. Tangible assets, but canned food. And I would do this if we're going to have hyperinflation and it does take off and it gets out of control, then those stores are going to be empty the first week.
Yeah.
There will be nothing. So I just recommend if you have space and you can stack canned foods, and listen, if you punch your ticket, somebody will come in and they will get it from your house, okay? Your children or your grandchildren or whatever. So there's nothing lost. And you can always eat it. You know what I mean? Rotate it around or something. I am a big fan, not of, what do you call it? Hoarders. I'm not a big hoarder, but canned food is something that it just doesn't go bad. It's not going to be eaten by rats, and you're not losing anything. Canned food while you can. That's my recommendation. And wait until this week. Nothing's been 2 for $1 at Publix, but as soon as it's 2 for $1, I'm going to clean that store out, okay? There you go. So go to a different Publix. All right. He says gold may be a bit expensive for most, but silver is still really cheap. And it is. Williams says everything is going to go up in price. When will the worst inflation be hitting America? Williams predicts. I am looking down the road, and in early 2022. I am looking for something close to a hyperinflationary circumstance and effectively a collapsed economy. I don't want to scare anybody with that, but I've seen this. I think it's right to report it, and I've seen enough other articles on this in the past 7 days to tell you that this is probably coming because these people know what they're talking about. Some of them disagree, I'll tell you that right now, but canned food, you can afford it. If you got space, buy it. From BI, Business Insider. A chief strategist who called the 2020 crash shares 5 indicators that show more than adequate evidence of a stock market bubble and warns an up to 60% crash is highly likely. He said this a couple weeks ago. Get out of the stock market. That's his call. It's not mine. I'm not in the stock market, so I don't care. But I would like you to know that if you're in the stock market, we have a professional over here, a retired police officer that says get out of the stock market. There you go. And he's also a very smart guy. So that's just, I don't care what you do with your money, but I wouldn't be in it. Mail Online. Bill Barr says progressives' agendas in schools are unconstitutional and are creating militantly secularist government-run classrooms. You know what my thought is? Bill Barr, you should have supported your previous president. That's my thought, but I'll read the article anyway. He said, radical secular theology is being taught in schools. It was a threat to religious freedom. Giving militantly secularist government schools a monopoly over publicly funded education was a disaster. Schools have become the front line in America's culture wars. Barr also weighed in on critical race theory, dismissing it as a Marxist theory, something I said, last week in our sermon. Weasel Zippers. White House admits to Biden admin dropping off migrant children in cities without local officials knowing.
Yes.
You know what I think that is? No, it's insurrection. That is an insurrection. We don't know what these people are doing. We don't know if they've strapped bombs onto them. They're doing something without local officials knowing it, and this is an insurrection against the United States of America. This is an insurrection.
None of them were vaccinated.
None of them were vaccinated either, which is a double insurrection. Okay? My son, who is going to be married in 21 days, just walked in. Very excited about this. All right, Mail Online. Mayor of St. Louis, the murder capital of America, claims more cops do not prevent crime after cutting $4 million from department's budget and pledging to close a prison. We'll see how this goes in a year. Tashara Jones became first ever black woman to become St. Louis mayor. Last month, Jones approved plan to slash $4 million from the police budget. She also eliminated 98 officer vacancies and closed down a city jail. Last year, St. Louis saw its murder rate soar to the highest since 1970. We'll see. I'll bet you it'll soar a lot higher in the next 12 months. Anybody? Anybody want to bet against that?
Take that long.
Nobody's taking that bet. Okay, she says it won't take that long. Zero Hedge.
What she's doing is she's killing the black people.
She's killing the black people of her community. That's exactly what she's doing.
Point.
Zero Hedge. U.S. embassies worldwide are flying BLM flags this week. Representative Andy Biggs lashed out at the unprecedented authorization. BLM burned down cities and caused billions in property damage. They are the antithesis of American values and do not belong on any of our embassies, and they're flying them on all of our embassies. Keto News. What happens when you eat nothing but bacon
Yes.
for 30 days straight? We're going to find out right now. Now, it's a very long article. You can go read it. But this is, listen, we're going into the end times, okay? And so we need to know what will keep us healthy or not. What's that?
Is there canned bacon?
Canned bacon, I'm sure there is. Okay, here we go. Meet Dan Quibell, the man behind the bacon experiment, a 30-day bacon fast or feast. Why bacon, Dan? Short answer, because bacon is awesome. What results did you see? Dan, the biggest and most unexpected change was losing so much body fat in 30 days. I lost 19.6 pounds by the end of the month and ate 60 pounds of bacon during that same time. My energy was good the entire time, and my doctor was quite impressed with my blood work. I had a complete blood panel done before and after this experiment. My blood pressure dropped 30 points. My cholesterol numbers looked good, and my liver markers were perfect. My doctor told me, listen to what the doctor said. Keep doing whatever it is that you are doing because it is working.
Yes.
Takeaway number 1, eating fat does not necessarily make you fat. In fact, a low-carb, high-fat diet can be a great way to improve your body composition by simultaneously lowering body fat and maintaining muscle mass. Takeaway number 2, a high-fat, low-carb diet can actually improve your health markers, including blood pressure and cholesterol levels. Takeaway 3, bacon is delicious. Duh. I have to throw in something funny because this world would be completely pathetic otherwise, but we have some good things left in it. Okay, who said it? My friend Todd sent me this. Who said it? They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Who said it?
Karl Marx.
Karl Marx, the last sentence of the Communist Manifesto. If you've never read it, I read it a week ago. I was bored and I thought I wasn't bored. I needed to know. And so I read it. It is the most ungodly document that I've ever read. And I'm going to tell you something. There is no light at all in that. None. That guy had no idea what he was talking about. He was looking and saying, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Listen, what he thinks is going to happen is exactly the opposite. But take the time. It's not real long. It'll take you an hour or so to read through. And Karl Marx said that. Good job. You get a Maserati. Here, you want a YF-22? Go take that and fly it around for a while. Be back for sermon time. Okay, I got a lesser. Actually, I've got 2 here for you because I have enough time today. So bacon does not make you fat. If you don't eat bad carbs, 2 with that. I might give it a try, much bacon I'll buy, and lower my blood numbers stat. Are you tired of apples? Don't wig. I've got great news for you about pig. Now it's bacon each day that keeps doctors away. You'll lose weight, you'll look great, do a jig. Good job, okay. All right, we've got a bit of irony here for you today from Weasel Zippers. I know, death is sad. I know that. Don't email me that I bring up death so often. It's the only ironic thing that ever happens. All right, Weasel Zippers. New York City woman fatally shot while at vigil for man shot 24 hours earlier. Mail Online. This is not death, so that's good. CBS News crew attacked while reporting on violence on South Beach. Such is the world we live in. So from Sarasota, Florida to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, I'm Charlie Garrett, and that is your CG report for the week.